when it comes to Philadelphia's roster. Talking about what you might want here for Washington. But speaking of Washington's roster, so Field Yates, all right, wicked smart little guy, works for ESPN, a lot of draft talk, fantasy talk, analytics, the whole 9 yards. And he did a mock draft here, and here's what he says. As the Commanders look to surround Jaden Daniels with more playmakers, they could tap back into the Ohio State receiver pipeline to pair Terry McLaurin with Emeka Egbuka, who leaves Columbus with the most catches in school history. Egbuka is the most ready-made prospect in this class as he features pristine route running, reliable hands, and a selflessness as a blocker that the Commanders would undoubtedly love. He caught 10 touchdowns for the Buckeyes this season. Toblerone, I ask you at 29, the little ding-ding-ding-ding. With the 29th pick in the NFL draft, the Washington Commanders, whose name should change immediately. This is Mike Goodell. Select Egbuka. Your thoughts?
I don't hate it. I don't love it. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle because if there are not better options, then sign me up. I like Emeka Egbuka. He's not special to me as a receiver. He's a solid player. He's not exceptional, but the way that receiver has gone in the National Football League, guys are getting paid a lot of money. And so if you can get one on a rookie contract that can be impactful, even if it's a guy that's going to be a number 2 receiver, I don't hate that idea. They need to upgrade at wide receiver outside of Terry McLaurin. So I would like that idea, but I think that's something that maybe you do through free agency, or that's something you maybe do in the middle rounds of the draft alongside maybe a running back. I would love to see them address the line first. If that's something where the O-line, they're just not good guys, like what happened last year where they tried to trade back into the first and they couldn't get back into the first, and then they end up coming up to the pick early in the second round. There's just not guys there, so they went with Johnny Newton. Then fine, I don't mind passing on it then and then going with the wide receiver, but I would prefer to see a little bit more emphasis paid on the lines of scrimmage going into this season. But I have no issue with Egbuka getting drafted there. So if that's your best player on the board and that's who you take, sign me up.
So I want that too. The thing you just said about the offensive line. I beat the drum. I thought before the season started this year, they needed to do better. I don't know how many avenues there were for them to do better. Again, I go back to free agency. The best player, the best tackle, the most accomplished tackle in the marketplace was Tyron Smith, who signed for a year and like $11. Numbers approximate. There aren't premium upgrades at the tackle spot. Guard market, a little more robust, but even still, I don't think you're going to do a whole heck of a lot better than Sam Cosby, certainly a right guard, and or Nick Allegretti at left guard, a guy who had started on a really good offense, a Super Bowl winning team. Again, not a star, but solid enough. I want to do better there. I want to do better at right tackle. I want to do better at left guard and maybe ultimately left tackle. Now, the team has to decide, is Brandon Coleman, did he show enough to be the left tackle anchor of the future, or do you solve one of those other 2 spots, aka right tackle or left guard, with Brandon Coleman? He is a positive asset. Don't get me wrong. He's not a liability. I want to be great there, right? And I think that's an avenue where you use a premium resource to do it. I just don't think it's in free agency. So this is the part where you and I may disagree, Tobes. As I look at what happens in free agency over the last couple of years, I mean, you heard more Earl's updates. T. Higgins might get franchise tagged. And by the way, if I'm Cincinnati, that's exactly what I would do. I would franchise him. No, he might be pissed about it, but I don't want to lose him for nothing. I also don't want to give him a huge mega extension because of all the injury history that he has. He's a star. He's perfect opposite Jamar Chase as kind of a 1A. He's a number 1 for a lot of offenses, and I think he'd be really, really good for them. But the point of the dude's story is their window is right now with a couple defensive upgrades. They could be right back into the thick of things as a threat to Kansas City and company in the AFC. But I digress. There aren't premium players at tackle, usually at receiver. You can work via trade, whether it was Keenan Allen, Stephon Diggs, not to disrespect these guys, but there's a wrinkle there. There's damaged goods. It's either Allen may have lost a step, or for Diggs, it was, maybe attitudinal, where it was welcome in Buffalo. I don't know, but it's not as if you could just go pluck a 26-year-old in his prime off somebody that's going to give you 1,300 yards. I don't know that that's available. To me, this was kind of the issue, if there was one, that I had with Peters and company this past offseason in the draft, was that's where you have to go get some of these premium positions in that first and second round window of tackle receiver. Mikey Sanders still turned into a really nice player. He'll be an asset for him. I'm a fan. I ultimately hope that he's able to go back into the slot what they drafted him to do by either Lattimore playing better or another corner to replace St. Jude / Michael Davis / whoever's opposite there. But if San Francisco's got to play on the outside, you have another need there, but that's secondarily. To me, those other second-round picks, you got very little from Ben Sinnott. Maybe you do one day, but it didn't really help you. Johnny Newton was a rotational piece on the defensive line that couldn't stop anybody and couldn't wreak any havoc. Again, fine, not like a liability or a disaster, but if I had a gripe, that's what it would be. So to me, this is where these first couple of rounds, Tobes, and I'll tag you back in, that's where I'm targeting lineman, receiver. These other spots that we all agree they need them. It's just shuffle up and deal as to your priorities and or how you acquire them. But to me, using a first-round pick on a tackle or a receiver is music to my ears, trying to make sure that this offense, you can beat Carolina as is. You can't beat Philadelphia as is. You're it.
Yeah, and I think when you look at it, the reason maybe I'm a little bit more hesitant is this year I don't love the draft class at wide receiver at the top nearly as much. If we're talking about last year and we're talking about a potential of a guy like a Brian Thomas Jr. who fell to a 29, he was picked 23rd, so he was kind of in that range. If he fell somewhere to 29, then I think I would run that card in. Versus Emeka Egbuka, I really like him, but I don't know that I love him at 29 versus other options. And so that's kind of where I would lean. You know, at the end of the day, your point is right. They need to upgrade. And so sometimes we do this with the draft. We do this with free agency where we argue over a few $1 million. We argue over about 10 different spots. Mm-hmm. Did you end up with your guy or did you not? And sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and go get the guy. And so if that's what they deem, like this is how we're going to address it. And the beauty of this is we're going to know beforehand how they're going to go through free agency. Do they sign an offensive tackle? Do they go sign the wide receiver so they can kind of address these things beforehand? What is ultimately going to be their decision? If we fast forward to April and they're in Green Bay, 29th pick, and they pick Emeka Egbuka, I'm not going to be pissed. Like, it's a good pick, I think. It's just I don't know that that's my number one option, but I think it would make sense for them to upgrade that position because regardless of what you're going to do with the offensive line and stuff, the skill position guys around Jaden have to be upgraded. If that's the avenue they want to go, that's fine as well.
So also maybe the sticking point here is I think I like Egbuka more than you do. The description to me sounds like a Peters type player, right? Where he's to me, he's like a slot plus. Like we think of a slot receiver, it's like the 5'8" water bug, it's like a prime Jamison Crowder or a Olamide Zaccheaus or I don't know, a Wes Welker, smaller guy that's his role. The kind of this new world order as defenders are more and more positionless, right? These safeties are linebackers and also corners and they cover and do a little bit of everything. I think so too that's happening with receiver. So I look at a Jackson Smith and Jigba, for example, again, another Ohio State product, where if you just go, I got a slot receiver, I'm going to take him early. I'm going, really? You sure about that? But we all know that dude's more than just a regular slot guy, right? He's one part Debo Samuel, and I'm hyping up JSN, but he's one part Debo Samuel in terms of, catch and run. He's one part good blocker. He's one part, I can actually run the whole route tree from the outside. If you match me up on a slot corner, I get a matchup that I like. I think Egbuka probably is not the most explosive guy. He's not his teammate, Jeremiah Smith. But that I catch touchdowns, I'm a good blocker, you can line me up anywhere, that smells Kingsbury to me. That smells, a guy that's always open to me. And it may not be as sexy at times, but I think he pairs well with another Ohio State guy, Terry McLaurin. But it's not a segment about Egbuka specifically. It's maybe about the concept. It sounds like you're more open to it than I thought a lot of people would be. Because around here, quite frankly, I mean, you're a lot younger than me. I'm pretty much twice your age. But around here, if you say something other than offensive and defensive line, you're basically asking to fight. You know what I mean? Like you're basically saying, you're disrespecting the Hogs somehow. Even though the league has changed and morphed and done a bunch of different things, it's still a game that's played and won and dominated in the trenches. We just saw Philadelphia do that with a great O-line, great D-line. They're hoisting a trophy. But the idea that you can't do both things to make sure that a quarterback has outlets on that 3rd and 8 where they're going to struggle against Philadelphia. Again, not against Cleveland, not against Arizona, not against Carolina, against Philadelphia, who can lock them up. And we just saw them do it a couple of weeks ago. I'm all in for adding to that side of the football because I think you can add to defense the way they just added the defense. I mean, look at their player acquisitions this past year. You can find a Dante Fowler the same way the Eagles a couple of years ago found Hassan Reddick, who had, 17 sacks for them. It's not easy. And it requires you getting it right, but what doesn't in the world of the NFL and player acquisition, right? I mean, to me, you look at the cornerback market, for example, guys are going to be free agents, much more robust than would be the wide receiver market or the tackle market. But Tobes, let's see what people think about this. 800-636-1067. 800-636-1067. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I would say you are whelmed by the idea of going receiver there at 29.
Yeah.
That's fair, whelmed. I'm giddy about it. I'm Josh Giddy without the legal issues. I'm all over it. Thank you, Tobes, for getting that. I am all about it. I want playmakers. I want excellence on that side of the football. I think it's an arms race. I think you got away and you got the most you can get out of kind of the Island of Misfit toys that they just finished producing with this year. I think you need to dramatically upgrade talent on that side of the ball to make it so that you don't have to win a certain way where you can't run the ball, you can't really throw it deep, and you kind of have to have Jaden Daniels manage the game like a supercomputer without really being able to run it or throw it in certain ways and hold possession of the football for 28 minutes per half. That's hard to do. That's a hard tightrope to walk. I know they just did it, but that's not sustainable to me. What's sustainable is that third down war daddy. What's sustainable is what the Eagles have, talent everywhere.